Growing up, my family would always take a vacation every single year to Niagara Falls. And we would stay in a glorious place called Great Wolf Lodge. I don't know if you've ever been, but it was pretty much a kid's dream. There was a water park inside the hotel. It was awesome. And we always went with the same family. We were family friends with them. There were 7 kids in my family and 11 kids in their family. And so all 18 of us would be unleashed upon this water park, and we'd have the time of our lives. Now, my friend always wanted to be in the arcade that was at Great Wolf Lodge, and I just didn't like the arcade as much. I didn't like the lights. I didn't like all the noise coming off of the machines. Maybe it was a little bit of sensory overload for me. I don't know. But the main reason is because, like, dude, we're wasting time in the arcade when we could be on a water slide right now. Like, why are we here playing games? But you could go into this arcade, you could play these games, and if you won, you got tickets that you could go and trade in the shop for whatever little prizes they had on the shelves. It was really reinforcing gambling at a very young age for us as kids. And I walked into the shop and I saw on the shelf something that I really wanted. It was this little figurine of dolphins. Now you might be wondering, Father Isaac, why? Why did you want these dolphins? Well, I don't have any particular likes or dislikes of dolphins. I'm kind of ambivalent towards them. Haven't quite made up my mind. But my sister at the time loved dolphins. She was obsessed with them. And so I thought, I'm going to win this prize, and I'm going to give it to my little sister for Christmas, because I'm that kind of big brother, you know? And so I entered into this arcade with a new resolve, and I played those games, and I endured the humiliation of going to my parents and asking for more money when I ran out in order to keep playing games. But eventually, my hard work paid off, and I won that dolphin. And I brought it home, and I wrapped it up, and I put it under the Christmas tree with my sister's name on it and waited for Christmas Day. So Christmas morning, she unwraps the gift, and I'm really excited, and I watch her, and I'm like, I hope she likes it. And she did like it. She loved it, actually. She put it beside her bedside table there. And I was so overjoyed watching my sister open this present that I had given her. In fact, I had more joy in watching her open a present that I had given to her than I did opening up all the presents that were for me that morning. And I couldn't put it in words, but as a kid, I was experiencing for the first time that sentiment of it's better to give than to receive. Now, gift giving, it's a huge part of the Christmas season. And that's primarily because of the 3 wise men who came to give those gifts to Jesus at that very first Christmas. This is where the whole tradition of gift giving comes from. But who were these wise men? Otherwise known sometimes as the magi or the 3 kings, depending on the translation. But in this time, in the nations surrounding Israel, there were many pagan nations, and the kings of those nations would often have a team of wise men who would act as his counselors. And so these wise men would, in particular, they would study the stars, because the stars were seen to be as messages from the gods. And they would come to the king and they would tell him what the stars were telling him to do. And so most likely these wise men saw a star in the sky that to them symbolized a new king had been born to the Jewish nation. And so they went out to find him. Even though they were not Jews themselves, they were Gentiles, they went out to find this king, and as was customary, they brought with them gifts from their homeland in order to establish a kind of friendship between this new king and the kings that they represented. And so these wise men, they left their home country, they followed the star all the way to Bethlehem, where they found the Holy Family. And it says when they found Jesus, they knelt down and paid him homage. And then opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These are very costly gifts, very expensive, that would have been customary to give to a new king. But these gifts have a much deeper meaning than even the wise men would have fully understood at that time. That first gift, the gift of gold, even today is associated with royalty. It's a precious metal that you would give to a king. And so it symbolizes that Jesus is the true king of the world. He's not just the king of the Jews. He's the king of every nation, and he wants to be the king of every human heart, without exception. And that second gift of frankincense, well, frankincense or incense is used in worship ceremonies. So in the temple, they would burn incense before God because the smoke rising up would symbolize the prayers of the people rising up to God, and the sweet smell of the incense would be a reminder of the prayers of the people being pleasing to God, a sweet aroma to the Lord. And we still use incense as Catholics in our liturgies today, especially when worshiping the Eucharist. When we have Mass and the priest holds up the body and the blood of Jesus, the altar server will wave incense, burning it before Jesus. We do the same thing during adoration. And then finally, myrrh. Myrrh was actually, of the three gifts, the most expensive one. It was the most valuable one. And in that time, myrrh was used in burial rites. So when a loved one died, the people would put myrrh on the body, and they would embalm the body with the myrrh, and then they would place it in the tomb. And we actually have evidence of this taking place at Jesus' own burial. In the Gospel of John, we read that the friends of Jesus came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes. And they took the body of Jesus, bound it in linen cloths with the spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews. And it makes me wonder, was this myrrh that was used at Jesus' burial the same myrrh that was given to him as a child? And so all of these different gifts are given to the Lord. The wise men probably didn't understand fully the significance of what they were giving, but I think they definitely understood part of it. And here's why. It says that they were overwhelmed with joy when they found Jesus, when they gave him these gifts. And they kneel down before him, and they recognize in this human baby that there is something more than meets the eye. They recognize a hidden divinity because they fall down before him and they worship him. And even though they're not Jews, they're pagans, they are filled with joy when they meet the King of the Jews. Is it possible that God has opened their eyes, that there's a revelation given to their hearts to look at this tiny child and realize that this child has actually been born for the whole world? That this child has been born to bring in a kingdom that will impact every people and tribe and nation. This is why they bring Jesus these gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They're overwhelmed with joy at the birth of this tiny king. Well, what if you could experience that same joy when you give a gift to Jesus this year? Is it possible that there is a gift that you can give to the Lord that would fill you with this kind of joy? Now, it's probably true that after Christmas, you don't have a whole lot of extra gold lying around, if you know what I mean. And if any of you are stockpiling gold, you wouldn't raise your hand anyway. You've got it hidden away somewhere. And you probably don't have any myrrh or frankincense in your spice cabinets. I wouldn't advise cooking with it, even though it smells good. It's a trap, don't do it. But what if you could give the Lord something even more precious than gold and frankincense or myrrh? What if instead of giving him literal gold fit for a king, you surrendered the gold of your life to Jesus by making him your king? That you would surrender to him as Lord of everything. That you said, Jesus, I want you to be the king of my life. I'm tired of living for myself. I'm tired of calling the shots on everything in my life. Lord, I want to give you my life. I want to surrender to you and live for you as my king. What if instead of literal frankincense that was used in worship ceremonies, you gave the Lord the incense of your worship, of your praise, of your adoration? That you got serious about spending time with the Lord every day in prayer, that you thanked him every single day, you spent time with him, that you came to the church when we have our times of adoration, where in adoration, it's so beautiful, it's so similar to what these wise men did. The wise men came and they knelt down before Jesus, and all they saw was a human baby, but they recognized his hidden divinity. And in adoration, we come and we look at what looks like a little piece of bread, but we see the hidden divinity of Jesus in that. And we kneel down before him and we offer him the incense, the praise of our hearts in adoration. And finally, myrrh. How do we offer God myrrh, spiritual myrrh from our life? Well, the wise men gave this gift to Jesus, and ultimately it would be used after he suffered and died as a sacrifice for us, as he offered up his suffering to the Father for our salvation. What if we offered to the Lord the myrrh of our own sufferings, our own sacrifices that we offered to God? Might sound a bit strange, doesn't it, to offer up our sufferings to God? It's this principle that we have as Christians called redemptive suffering, that suffering actually can be redemptive. It can actually redeem. What does it mean to give our suffering up to God? You know, growing up, my parents, whenever I complained, there's too many mosquitoes outside, it's too hot, I don't want to do this, whatever, they would just look at me and they would say, Isaac, offer it up. Offer it up. It's like the Christian way of saying, suck it up, kid. Offer it up. But they mean offer up your sacrifices, offer up your sufferings to the Lord. Don't let them go to waste. Jesus' suffering had incredible value. His suffering bought our salvation. And when we take our sufferings, big or small, and we unite them to the cross, our suffering takes on value as well. It becomes valuable for ourselves because we grow in character and we learn not to complain and we learn to become people that don't try to avoid discomfort at every available time. But it also becomes valuable because we can offer it up as a kind of prayer for other people, that our suffering, when united to Christ, has incredible value. And so altogether, we can imitate the wise men in giving gifts to Jesus. We can give him gold by making him the king of our life. We can give him frankincense by offering him our worship. And we can give him myrrh by offering up to him our sufferings. And when we offer these precious gifts to God, he fills us in return with his joy. It is better to give than to receive. God is never outdone in generosity. It's not like we can outgive God. It's not possible. When we give something to God, he responds and fills us with a superabundance of joy. I was talking recently with a young woman here at the parish who used to be an atheist. And I was asking her what it was like to be an atheist. I've never experienced that. I've always believed in God. But she was explaining what it was like to have herself be the reference of her whole universe. That everything depended upon her. She set the standard for everything, including what it meant to be happy. And she said, there's no guidelines, just drugs, porn, and McDonald's. It's terrible. I couldn't help but feel this profound sense of superficiality in the world. I was desperately looking for meaning and trying to make sense of it all. But there's so much noise to cut through, and I never could. This is the state of having to lean on yourself for everything. But when someone shared with her about Christianity and she started to do her own research and she discovered that the Catholic faith is true, she committed her life to Jesus as Lord. She surrendered to him as King. And in this experience, she said, then I found him. And it was pretty much euphoria. She found the Lord. Like the wise men, she found Jesus. And the euphoria, the joy, is realizing it's not all based on me anymore. I can actually surrender my life to someone who loves me, who can take care of me, who can provide for me, and fill me with a joy that this world and all of the emptiness of it just can't do. I was, for Christmas, heading to someone's house for Christmas dinner. I was driving down the snowy road, and I had this experience of giving the incense of my heart to the Lord. I was singing Christmas carols, belting out all of these praise hymns to Jesus, and I was just singing about how Jesus had come to be born for me, and it just hit me. It hit me on a whole other level. Jesus had come for me this Christmas. He was born for me. And I started to laugh in the car. I was so filled with joy. I'm just laughing and laughing and laughing, crying, laughing, singing. I'm like barreling down the highway. Probably not the safest thing to be doing, but there I was. And I was just struck with how it started with me praising God, giving him this incense from my heart, this frankincense to the Lord. But the Lord responded with joy. He gave me the gift of joy on his birthday. That's the kind of king we worship, that he gives other people gifts on his birthday. Jesus is so awesome. And when it comes to myrrh, I remember when I was living in Michigan, I was volunteering as a hospital chaplain, and I met this woman who was in serious pain. She'd been in the hospital for a while, was really suffering. Now, she wasn't Catholic, and the Christian theology that she had been raised in, it didn't really have an understanding of redemptive suffering. She hadn't been raised with that. And so she was actually very bitter towards God, because she was like, well, why doesn't he just heal me? Why doesn't he get me out of this hospital? Why doesn't he do something? The pain just seemed like meaningless torture to her. And I was able to chat with her and just explain how when we unite our sufferings with Jesus on the cross, we can become close to him in that. We suffer with Jesus, and that suffering can be offered up for her loved ones. And she began to cry. Just tears rolled down her face because her suffering had meaning now. It had value. It meant something. And the Lord was able to give her a peace and even a quiet joy in the midst of her terrible suffering. And so today, as we celebrate the Feast of Epiphany, I really encourage you, look at your own life and see if you can open up the treasure chest of your heart to give the Lord something precious, to give the Lord a gift. Maybe you're called in a special way to give the Lord gold. That you need to, in a concrete way, say, Jesus, you're the King. I give my life to you. I surrender everything that I am to you. Maybe it's incense. That you're called to give the frankincense of your worship to the Lord. That you're called to spend more time in adoration, to pour out your heart of worship to the Lord. Or maybe you're going through a lot of suffering, a lot of trials right now. And the Lord is inviting you to give him the myrrh, the most valuable gift of all, precisely because it is so difficult to give. Whatever it is, open up the treasure chest of your heart. Imitate the wise men who gave their gifts to the King of Kings and in return were filled with supernatural joy.